Draft Caribbean Development Bank, 11th Replenishment of the Special Development Fund, Unified Order 2026.
I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Ms Jardine. A pleasure to serve under your chairship, I think, for the first time. I beg to move that the committee has considered the Draft Caribbean Development Bank's 11th replenishment of the Special Development Fund Unified Order 2026 laid before the House on the 8th of January. The draft order will permit the UK Government to make financial contributions to the Special Development Fund of the Caribbean Development Bank up to the stated values. The Caribbean region is important to the United Kingdom. Our history and values are closely intertwined. 12 of the 53 Commonwealth states are in the region, along with 5 out of 14 UK overseas territories. There is a large Caribbean diaspora in the UK, and a significant number of British nationals visit as well as reside in the Caribbean. The Caribbean has strong economic links to the UK, and the UK was the destination for almost 10% of Caribbean goods exports in 2025. Although small in population size, countries in this region have a significant voice on global issues and in the international organisations, including the United Nations. We have shared interests in areas such as tackling climate change, global financial system reform, combating crime and violence, and fostering trade and inclusive economic development. The Caribbean Development Bank, or CDB, is the sole multilateral development bank that is exclusively focused on the Caribbean region, providing over $312 million in 2024. The UK has a long-standing partnership with CDB. We were one of the founding members and are currently the joint largest non-regional shareholder and 9.3% shareholding. CDB plays a key role in the achievement of the UK's regional development objectives on supporting sustainable development and tackling the impact of climate change. Allow me to briefly take the committee through the background and the purpose of the draft order. The Special Development Fund, or SDF, is the consensual arm of the Caribbean Development Bank, which provides loans and grants to the most vulnerable countries in the region. It aims to reduce poverty, support human development, and strengthen climate and economic resilience across the Caribbean. It is replenished by donors every 4 years, and contributes to the fund come from regional and non-regional member countries of the Caribbean Development Bank, as well as non-members. In line with the UK's strategic shift towards multilateral assistance, the UK will commit up to £21 million to SDF to maintain our position as the second largest donor. This order allows for the provision of the core funding by the UK. This replenishment will play a crucial role in supporting the regional efforts to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDF will focus on promoting economic development and supporting increased resilience, with particular focus on environmental resilience.
Will the Minister give way on that point?
I will.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. Could he tell us who the largest donor will be?
If the member can give me 2 moments, I will get the correct list for him, because it's not in front of me. But it is in fact Canada. Very helpful to my left. The build resilience against, so to go through each of the points on the SDF, will build resilience against environmental stresses and disasters. The SDF will fund climate adaptation, disaster risk management, biodiversity prevention and sustainable energy. This will include 10 kilometres of new or improved sea defences and drainage, 6 megawatts of renewable energy and a reduction of 30,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions annually. Ensure Caribbean infrastructure, agriculture and small businesses are supported to thrive by training over 10,000 agricultural workers, improving 2,000 hectares of land, providing $75 million in credit to over 1,000 small businesses, half of which will be women-owned businesses, and building or upgrading 200 kilometres of roads. Support for poverty reduction efforts in the region and improve living conditions by targeting the most vulnerable communities. This will include improving water and sanitation for over 30,000 households, building or upgrading 1,700 classrooms, training over 18,000 teachers and improving learning conditions for 350,000 students. Improve financial systems and practices so individuals and governments and organisations can better manage risks and respond to uncertainty. 20 Caribbean ministries, departments and agencies will benefit from strengthened systems and services. Strengthen and modernise institutions so that they can respond effectively to challenges. The SDF will support digital transformation in 11 Caribbean ministries and agencies to help them operate more efficiently. The SDF is an essential lifeline to the region's most vulnerable people who have faced multiple crises over the last few years, including climate-related shocks to which the region is exponentially vulnerable. Supporting the SDF will help us achieve our objectives of a bigger, better and fairer global financial system, one that delivers for everyone and is fit for the future. To conclude, the Caribbean Development Bank's Special Development Fund is instrumental in achieving UK objectives in the Caribbean region. The financial contributions covered by this order will deliver UK international development and foreign policy objectives in some of the world's most climate vulnerable countries. And I commend this order to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Caribbean Development Bank 11th replenishment of the Special Development Fund Unified Order 2026. I call Opposition Spokesperson Wendy Morton.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Jardine, and I'd start by thanking the Minister for setting out the draft Caribbean Development Bank order. The Caribbean faces profound and overlapping challenges, and we recognise that the Caribbean Development Bank makes a contribution to supporting resilience, stability and development across the region. Nevertheless, given the pressures on the aid budget, it is right that Parliament seeks clarity on priorities, governance and outcomes. The Special Development Fund is the bank's primary concessional window, and this 11th replenishment comes at a moment of acute vulnerability for many Caribbean states. Hurricanes and extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and severity, placing extraordinary strain on infrastructure, public finances and social systems. Disaster preparedness, climate resilience and rapid recovery must therefore be central to how these funds are deployed. So my first question to the Minister is about priorities. What strategic objectives has the UK pressed for in this replenishment, and did the bank agree to them? And how will funding balance long-term development with urgent disaster response, particularly for the small island developing states that repeatedly are hit by hurricanes? Secondly, what influence does the UK retain as a contributor? And can the Minister set out how the UK uses its voice within the Caribbean Development Bank to shape investment decisions, policy standards and value for money? And how closely is this aligned with wider UK development and foreign policy objectives in the Caribbean? Then just briefly turning to measurement and accountability, what criteria will be used to assess whether this replenishment is delivering results, and how will those outcomes be tracked, and with what reporting provided to Parliament? And finally, will the government commit to regular updates on the impact? Because there is also a growing geopolitical context that cannot be ignored. China has increased its footprint across the Caribbean through finance and infrastructure. So how does the Development Bank, or how is the Development Bank ensuring that its lending offers a transparent, compelling and also high standards alternative? And what role is the UK playing in reinforcing those safeguards? Finally, on preparedness and recovery, I'd just like to take this opportunity to ask the Minister if he can update the committee briefly on how the bank is working with the private sector, including the world-class insurance industry in the City of London, to improve risk insurance, catastrophe financing and faster recovery after hurricanes. Madam Chair, the opposition, His Majesty's official opposition, recognises the importance of the Caribbean Development Bank, and we are not opposing the statutory instrument this evening. But of course scrutiny does matter, clear priorities too, and measurable outcomes and transparent reporting. And this will be absolutely essential if this funding is to deliver real resilience for Caribbean nations and value for money for the UK taxpayer. And so I just look forward to hearing the Minister's responses. Thank you.
Minister Elmore.
Thank you very much, Ms Jardine. Can I thank the official opposition for their support? And I want to try and come back to as many of the Shadow Minister's points as I can. So to try and canter through questions, and the usual caveat applies, I will write to the Honourable Lady if I've missed something or if I'm able to give a substantive answer. On the first point around climate and disaster risk, SDF 11 will have at least 35% of early funding allocated to climate projects, rising to 40%. So it's an early part of the structure. On priorities, there are pillars, so climate resilience, production, poverty, living conditions, financial systems and digital transformation. They form part of our work within the wider work around overseas development aid and the funding that goes with it. On expected results and how we would be able to maintain and check those. So we've got 5 areas. One is around climate resilience, which is linked to 10 kilometres of sea defences, 6 megawatts of renewables, production of 10,000 trained agricultural workers. So these are the listed outcomes that I gave in my speech earlier, but these are the set outcomes of how the funding can be used. On governance and the UK's role in this, within my speech I made comment of up to £21 million. That is actually part of our sort of governance and scrutiny arrangements around the work of the new Chief Executive of the Development Bank, but also making sure that we have meaningful deliverables and play our part in the governance structure of the bank. Just on insurance work and the work within the wider work around risk management and the work that the bank does, but also the UK government does in this space. The best example I can give her is what happened recently in the Caribbean with Jamaica and Hurricane Melissa. HMG were at the very, very forefront of being able to access additional insurance relief funding in response to Melissa. So actually that work is ongoing, but crucially the UK government is at the very, very forefront of being able to secure that funding for the Caribbean. I would completely agree with her around the vulnerabilities of SIDS, obviously of which all Caribbean nations are them, and I've seen for myself at the beginning of December the sheer scale of a climate shock like Melissa in Jamaica, where you can literally see roads that were there that are no longer, and that forms part of those initial challenges. I am grateful to her comments and for the official opposition's support. And the SDP fund is a vital source of finance, as I've mentioned to the committee, for some of the most vulnerable countries and people in the world, and supporting the fund is essential to strengthening development and resilience across the region. And I hope that the committee will indeed support the order. I so move.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Caribbean Development Bank 11th replenishment of the Special Development Fund Unified Order 2026. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Committee Room